All right. Welcome to the Muddy Waters podcast in conjunction with the Wartime Christianity podcast with Truthslinger. And we have with us a guest from Ireland. Oh, well, I mean, not from Ireland might not be the right way to put it. But I can let you explain. I just wanted a couple of things. Like, we wanted to have a conversation. Partly, we had talked last week, and one of the things that, like, I've known, but I don't know how many people here in the state of Maine who pay attention to our podcasts are really fully aware of how much the issues that are going on in our state are not unique to us, but it's part of a bigger game. And so we wanted to have you come on to be able to talk about like what's going on, in Ireland where you are, but also we could talk a little bit about like where you come from and all how you got involved in all this stuff. I'm actually going to make you the presenter essentially. So do I like that one or this one? We'll do this one. All right.
And of course, I've heard a rumor that you might be interested in paying us a little visit here in Maine. So I'm interested to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, excellent. I'm always up for a visit to Maine. Maine is one of my favorite places in the world. My heart is always in Maine, although I live in Ireland, and my heart is here as well. I'll always be a Mainer.
Yeah. Oh, very nice.
Awesome. We love that. So because you were born here, if you come back, you're not from away, even though you've spent so much time outside the state. Sorry, Tim.
That's right. Yeah. So I guess
yes, I am.
Yeah, so just wanted to give you an opportunity to start, just kind of talk about who you are, where you come from, and kind of some about what you're doing there. Let me know if you want to move over to the slides, and we can do that as well to kind of go through some of the information that I think you have that you might want to share.
Yep, excellent. So I've been in Ireland 22 years, nearly 22 and a half now, and I came to Ireland 22 years ago for a work assignment at a big multinational, and I worked full-time for many years, and then I became a mom. So following a redundancy and also having children, I became a full-time stay-at-home mom with my two young children who are still in primary school. They're age 6 and 9. And about 5 years ago, I realized that the media and the government don't tell the truth. And for people listening who have been awake much longer, you're thinking, wow, you're a bit of a late bloomer. But I always say, better late than never. It's never too late to wake up to what's happening. Once you see things, you can't unsee it. And my great awakening was when the media and the governments around the globe in lockstep gave the same exact message, the same propaganda in relation to the COVID, for the greater good, stay at home, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We heard it on all through Europe and the States. And so I looked at the data, and my waking point was looking at the data to look at the demographics of this deadly virus, this virus that was so deadly, you might not even have a symptom if you have it. And when I looked at the data, I realized that my children and I probably aren't going to die from this SARS COVID-19. And then I looked at the flu data and I realized, oh, the flu disappeared. So there's no flu cases. They just moved over and rebranded identified as COVID. And then from after that, they were putting masks on children here. They created in Ireland, it was one of the longest lockdowns in the world. They went on and off for 2 years where schools were closed. You couldn't leave your house more than 5 kilometers. You couldn't buy things that weren't deemed as essential. So I couldn't buy my children shoes or toys. Apparently that's not essential. It was just absolute madness. And then after the COVID measures dropped, after they were requiring people to have a vax pass to even go into restaurants, cafes, pubs, the cinema. And there was a 2-tier society we were forced into for people like myself and my children who chose not to get the shot. We were forced into a medical apartheid system and we were shut out from society. And there were talks that we would be forced to get vaccinations. We thought we'd be hauled away to some sort of concentration camp or something. That all passed. And within a week of the COVID measures dropping, a week later, the country was being flooded with refugees from Ukraine, the women and children escaping the war. And all the COVID measures dropped. So people like myself couldn't go into a restaurant on a Monday, but on a Friday, our borders are flooded and people coming in with no shots were allowed to go everywhere. So that didn't make sense. And then I thought, okay, life is back to normal. I'll get back to starting my business and raising my children. And then we started seeing library books. And the library books that we saw were just shocking. So after looking at the library books, which there were a few areas of concern, they were highly sexualized. They were talking about some pretty grotesque adult fetishes that all of us would be pretty uncomfortable talking about at a dinner party.
Yes.
We did a whistleblower with a teacher from DCU, and she exposed what she learned on the course, and it made her personally feel violated. So violated, she resigned from her post as a social, personal health and well-being SPHE educator, and she is still a teacher but could not teach this with a moral conscience to children. So the library books were terrible, and we saw the same content in schools. It was gender ideology, teaching boys they can be girls, girls they can be boys, but it was also highly sexual, and that would actually traumatize a child. That level of material that's not age and stage appropriate can be permanently damaging to a child's mind. So we've been campaigning for about 2.5 years to get those library books out of the children's section, to get this ideology out of the schools, stop sexualizing children. And it's an ongoing battle, but I do feel the tide has turned, probably much due to the campaigning that all of us have done here to get parents aware. We made over 250,000 leaflets to get out on this little island here 2 years ago. But also due to the CAST report. Anyone listening should look up the CAST report. It was done in the UK. It took a few years to do. It was led by a pediatrician who was commissioned by the NHS. Her name was Dr. Hilary Cass. That's her name. And you can look up the CAST report. And that is the gold standard. It's flawed in some ways. It does allow certain uses of puberty blockers in very clinical trial settings, which we take a puberty blocker should never be used. We know they're damaging. They don't just pause puberty. They actually permanently damage a child's body, can even cause osteoporosis, brain damage, genitals to stop growing and all the rest. And they can, children are coming out not having their right to puberty or fertility when they grow up. So, but the CAST report's the best we have. And that states clearly that children should not be socially transitioned. A group of medical experts, best in class, have come out and said in a very detailed report, it's over 300 pages long, that children should not be transitioned, and that includes pronouns as well. So that's sort of the journey as to where I came from, what we've been doing. We founded the Natural Women's Council back in 2022. A group of us were lobbying to stop the government from erasing the word woman from the Maternity Protection Act, because obviously women don't have babies anymore. It's a birthing person. And of course, transgender men breastfeed. We have to be kind and inclusive. So let's just erase woman. They backtracked on that in 2022. But in 2024, just last March, they lobbied, the government did a referendum put out to all the people in Ireland to try to erase the words woman, mother, and home from our constitution in Ireland. Luckily, with all the campaigning and the public having good sense and morals, 75% voted no, which was a blunt instrument, crashing into the establishment. They got a blunt force trauma when 75% of the people said, no, we don't want this. So the public are waking up slowly but surely. People are seeing what's happening, and most logical, responsible, rational people do not want this. The public doesn't want it. It's coming from the top down, and that's the research that we've done to uncover where it's coming from, because people don't know whether to look left or right. They don't know where it's coming from or what to do. All they have to do is look up. It's coming from the top down. This is not a grassroots movement to protect the rights of a fringe minority. This is driven from the top down. It's an agenda, and it's an attack on the women, the children, and the family unit.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's you highlight. I think one of the things I think I intended to say, or I've been thinking about as we talked last week, is realizing that in some ways here in Maine, in particular, we're ahead of where Ireland is in other ways, and this is a really great example of where we're a little bit behind. Which is, I'm glad that we're behind in something and not as far out there as we possibly can be in radical land. But the idea of like we haven't got to the point of looking at trying to eliminate words like mother and home and yeah, that's just absolutely wild.
Mhm.
One of the things that I have a hard time understanding is how other people don't see this for what it is, right? That they don't recognize, especially people who have read. I think we mentioned. Hopefully, you'll pick it up and read it. I think you hadn't last week, but the book Brave New World. Anybody who's read Brave New World should see this exactly for what it is, and a lot of academics have, and somehow they're missing it. But like it's so obvious like what's happening is they're trying to condition us and like destroy the family unit, which is the best thing, it's a society maker essentially. Like the family unit is healthy, strong family units make for a healthy, strong family.
Right. Well, we saw this with BLM as well. It's a cultural Marxist color revolution is what this is. And so they've used this entire thing. And to me, it actually shocked me that the trans is the tip of the spear in this ideology, which is made Maine right now the center of the universe, because Janet Mills is spitting in the eye of Donald Trump and, of course, the whole Title IX thing, which is again, that's not just all what the problem is here. It's not just that. It's the men going into the girls' locker rooms. Mm-hmm. It is the, making them feel uncomfortable for saying anything about it and bullying, because that's bullying the trans person, and the weaponized empathy and all of it. And then, of course, the DEI principles and I get you talked about something that the raw sexuality, but most people don't know this, but the federal K through 12 sex education curriculum, I did not learn some of these things, like you said, until I was in my late 40s after a divorce, sowing some seeds. Okay, things that traumatizing that ruin kids' minds. And so that's where my burden comes from, is because both my children are estranged from me because exactly of this. Okay, I'm a hater. They're allies. All that junk. Okay, and all I'm guilty of is hate speech. That's all I'm a big hater, because they've weaponized and they've turned language. And I'm curious about what you have to say about that. Is it seems to me they flip everything over on its head and they say, well, you're not compassionate. You don't want to be inclusive. When in reality, it's like, no, what I'm doing is very loving for a majority of the population, of the young, vulnerable children that we're doing this to, and confusing them. Richard is in with us, and he did a video about the Western ritual of humiliation. You need to check it out.
I sent around the clip, and it's had about 7,000 views in the last few days. So Ireland and all of our networks are loving that video as well. So
Beautiful.
It's great. That was great. And those short clips are so important because people are so busy, and they're like, as you said, their empathy has been weaponized. And I think that's why, of all of the countries in Europe, Ireland is really in the belly of the beast as far as being under attack from globalists. We are the petri dish for globalism. And why that is I suppose Ireland's small, so it's very easy to corral and control a population. We saw it with COVID. We see it with the mass immigration. You may have seen my interview with Andrew Gold on heretics. We are our borders are flooded. But the Irish people they've never been a people who have colonized any other country. The Irish people were oppressed for 800 years. I mean, Ireland was under British rule. There was the oppression, and finally Ireland, got their full freedom and worked very hard for the freedom. So, Irish people don't need to feel guilty about anything. Irish didn't colonize any other country like the British did. We didn't have empires around the world, so to say. Ireland has neutrality, although the government's trying to stop it. But the Irish people are really nice. They're really welcoming. Even the land of a thousand welcomes. It's very friendly. People are warm. They have a good sense of humor. They're always up for the fun, which over here they call crack. Up for the crack. And they're a wonderful group of people, which is a wonderful race, which is why I stayed here 22 years ago after my 6-month assignment. And I think because they're so nice, they fell into the trap of doing everything for the greater good, to be kind, to be inclusive. But if we really, for anyone listening, break down the language, and the question I would ask anybody listening is, have we pushed it too far where we are using under the guise of kindness, we are now allowing men to beat our girls in sports? So my daughter, who's a swimmer and a runner, is it really kind to her to let a man beat her in her sport and shatter her dreams and her confidence? I don't think that's kind.
No.
Is it kind or inclusive to women to be forced to have a biological male enter their changing room at the gym, where they have to change and take their clothes off, or their toilet? Girls in school in Ireland are complaining that they don't want to use the toilets at school because the boys are using these gender neutral toilets. They're trying to deal with things that teenage girls deal with, such as their menstrual cycle and their personal, hygiene. They do not want boys in the room. So they are actually not using the toilet, and they're now getting urinary tract infections, kidney infections, and they're in pain during the day because they do not feel comfortable going into a toilet to share with a boy. So is that kind? Anyone listening who thinks that it's about kindness and inclusivity, is it kind and inclusive to women and children? Is it kind to stop a child's puberty and not give them the human right to go through puberty? That's their human right. We all went through puberty. We survived. We came out the other end, and it made us who we are. Is it kind or inclusive to stop a child from entering adulthood with their fertility intact? So all of the trendy mothers out there, the trendy liberal mothers who think it's really cool to have their trans-identifying child, is it really kind that you're potentially stopping your child from having a family and having love? And, parental rights are also under attack. We've heard situations where children in school settings in other countries and at clinics are getting transitioned to another gender of their choice without parental consent or involvement. I mean, that is heartbreaking. Like, we are the primary carers of our children. We need to, anyone listening who thinks it's kind and inclusive, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what is my job as a parent? Is it to be their friend, to be my child's pal, or is it to have a duty of care to look after your child's spiritual, mental, and physical and emotional well-being?
Yeah. Well, listen, Chuck, do you see all the parallels that she's talking about with Maine? It's like we're a microcosm. What you said is wild, because I've talked about this to my friends. Why Maine? Why is this liberal ideology? Everything that you talked about is happening here. Every single thing, all of it. Isn't it crazy, Chuck? How similar it is?
Well, and that's a big part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation, have this on here. Is this recognition of the fact that I'm trying to steal your word, the way that you phrase it, I should say, Jana, which the global parasites. That ultimately there's this that's what this is about. This is a global agenda by a few people who their ultimate objective is power and control, and it's important for the people of Maine and the people of Ireland, the people of all these other. I mean, you talk about Canada, Maine, New England, kind of the blue states in America, but not just there. This type of stuff is happening even in the red states, right? Like this is happening all over the Western world at this point, and is even trying to get into other areas. Primarily, the assault is on the Western world at the moment, but that's not the end game. And this is not something that is just that is limited to us. And I think recognizing that this is there's a bigger a thing afoot here will make us more effective, I think, at pushing back against it, recognizing that we have allies We have allies in Ireland. We have allies in other places where we can learn from one another and figure out, like, what are you doing there? What are you facing? How are you pushing back? Because this is something that's much bigger than just what's going on here in the state of Maine.
It is. And we've partnered up the Natural Women's Council, who also partner with a wonderful group of teachers called the Irish Education Alliance, who welcome any teacher to join their group to stand up against the madness as their duty of care as a teacher. We've partnered with them, but we've also partnered with groups around the West in UK, including England and Wales, in Canada, in the US, in Australia, New Zealand. So we've branched out, and exactly what we're seeing here, right down to the recommended YouTube videos by Amaze and all of those other indoctrinating outfits trying to sexualize children. Same YouTube videos, same companies are in all of the school books, all of the library books. And the interesting thing we found out recently, which media is going to publish for us this week, is that the Department of Education in Ireland does not approve or have authority or sign off over the books in the classroom. So you may be asking, who does? Well, the Department of Education wrote us a letter back and said to go to the publisher. So we went to the book publishers and said, what is your sign-off process for the books going in our children's classroom? And where is your risk assessment and your child safeguarding statement? How did the publishers react? One publisher called Gill Publishing, the Gill Education, who's a publisher of some extremely sexual books with 7 pages on detailed masturbation for age 12, books that want children to pair up in the classroom to talk about sexual experiences they wouldn't like, such as forced, painful, violent sex in the classroom with their children. My children would be traumatized and mortified. And that's not the place to be talking to children about that. That's a parent's job if they wish. So these books had no sign off from the Department of Education. The publisher, Gill Publishing Company, is one of the 3 who publish books in Ireland. They called a staff meeting. We got a call from a whistleblower telling them all their staff not to engage with us, not to talk to parents. They refused to return my emails. They refused to talk to me on the phone. And then we got a whistleblower who leaked an email to us. And the email from this publishing company who published books for my children said, there's a group called the Natural Women's Council who have concerns with our SPHE books. Please don't engage with them. We're going to be talking to authorities who know how to handle this group. They just don't know how to handle parents who ask questions. Wow, imagine that. So we basically have it in writing now, some incriminating letters from the Department of Education and from the publisher, and another publisher wrote to us this week to say, if you don't like the school books, talk to the teacher. So now they're taking plausible deniability and saying that it's the teacher's job to approve the books for the children. I mean, there's no control. There's absolutely no sign off and control. And the reason that is they do not want accountability. They want to pass the book on. And so we have taken it to the senators and the TDs, the upper and the lower house in Parliament here in Ireland. We have a few that are on our side with this, and it's going to be raised in Parliament to the Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, on why are these books going in front of children when there's no sign-off and no risk assessment. Now, it's worth noting that Miss Helen McEntee, her husband is a senior director at AbbVie. What kind of drugs do AbbVie make? Well, puberty blockers, Lupron. So in her role as Minister for Justice, she signed 72 genders into legislation, 72 genders, right? And that was what she signed in to push this gender nonsense, whilst her husband is profiting and while they're making money off transitioning children. She's moved from the Department of Justice to head up the Minister for Education role in Ireland. So now our classrooms are a target audience for Minister for Education McEntee's husband's puberty blocker drugs. So I wrote a letter to the standards for public office, and I asked for documentation to show us, did Helen McEntee fulfill her obligations and declare this this conflict of interest, because it is a conflict of interest. She's signing in legislation that she benefits from financially, and I have no problem calling that out. So I'll wait to see what they come back with.
Well, I just wanted to chime in, and I was going to ask you, how much pushback have you gotten? But what I found that I've gotten the night before a school board meeting, I had a sheriff's deputy knock on my door, and I got 2 restraining orders from 2 women on a school board that I was writing, only through the school emails. And then, of course, I was rebroadcasting the school board meeting, which they broadcast live on YouTube. I just restreamed it and commented. And they don't like the visibility. They're having attention brought upon them that they're not comfortable doing. They're comfortable to try to usher in this school-based health clinic on Thanksgiving Eve, Christmas break, Thanksgiving Christmas break or whatever. And we brought so much heat and light upon it that they couldn't do it. And they've been punting it down the road now for 6-7 months. And now they've gone and taken out temporary restraining orders against me and admitted in open court that they did it in order that I did not come to the meeting to express myself.
Yeah, they come down on us as well. We had a recent situation where 10 of us in Ireland, we're the Ireland's top 10 list, I guess we'll call ourselves, most wanted. 10 of us got a letter from Twitter X, from Elon Musk's team, and it stated that the Irish government, the Garda Síochána, who is our police, got a court order granted to them to monitor our private messages on Twitter, to monitor our devices, surveillance. Now, we got this notification from Elon Musk's team that they denied the Irish government this because it was a serious overreach. However, we have it on good source that Meta, which is Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, probably got the same order, and they're probably watching all of our messages on Facebook and WhatsApp and all of that. But the order they got to spy on me as a mother and a campaigner was under a criminal justice act, which includes things such as drug trafficking and terrorism.
You look scary, Jonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, real scary.
I don't even take aspirin. I never got my COVID shots. I don't traffic drugs. And as far as terrorism, I mean, they might think I'm a bit of a terror because I use the pen as my sword and I do a lot of events and I speak the truth, but I'm certainly not a terrorist by their definition. But these are the type of dirty tricks that they'll try to intimidate, bully, silence, and censor people like myself that speak up. They had another thing that one of our NGOs did, and the NGO public sector is actually funded heavily. They get a lot of our public funds. There's 32,000 NGOs in Ireland. Ireland only has 5 million people. It's the size geographically of Maine, and there's 32,000 NGOs that get 6 billion euros a year, 6 billion, to push the government agenda. So what they are is they're just an arm of the government to push out the agenda, whether it's to erase women, push hate speech bills, push open borders, push transing of kids. So these NGOs do the job of the government. They're their marketing people, but they also go around and they go into the Dáil, they get into our parliament, and they get privilege in the government. And they went into the government about a year ago to talk about me. And they had my face up on the screen in the AV room there. And they said that I am a middle-class Christian fundamentalist, anti-trans and all the rest. But I was linked to burning down immigration centers. So they linked me to arson, which obviously is completely false and slanderous. The call was recorded. We have a full recording. I probably could have sued them for in and out defamation, saying that I'm a arsonist, but the courts in Ireland are also corrupt. The courts here are a rigged casino. So if I took the state or these NGOs to court myself without funding, if Elon Musk is listening, you can certainly fund a lawsuit. I have about 4 queued up. But me taking on the state with all of their big, high-powered state-funded solicitors and barristers, I'd be bankrupted. So this is what they do. They also cancel events. Anytime you have an event to get the truth out, we have a serious cancel culture problem in Ireland, which is not only a free speech issue, but it's a real public order issue. I had a recent event called Safeguarding Children's Education, April 5th, just a month ago. And it was scheduled at a hotel and everything was paid in full. We have all of our speakers lined up. The hotel got to see our complete lineup. They got to see our ticket tailor, which had all of the details. And they started getting harassment from hard left extremists, many of them probably funded by the government. And they threatened the venue so much that we got a solicitor letter from their solicitors stating that due to 200 vociferous threatening emails, they're canceling our event.
Wow.
Yeah.
They didn't go to the Garda. They didn't go to the Garda Síochána, the police, to report this, but I did. So I went to the Gardaí in the area of Johnstown Hotel in Enfield, County Meath, and I met with the sergeant, a high-ranking officer, and explained the situation. And although he was, supportive and very sympathetic to the situation, he could not investigate those threats without the hotel producing the emails and threats and filing a case. However, Johnstown Hotel just thought it was much easier to cancel me and not go to the police at all.
Well, it is. And unfortunately, that's one of the biggest problems that we have is there are so few people who are actually willing to stand up and fight. So many people are just letting their freedom go away because it's expedient, it's convenient. I remember, I could get into telling stories about scenes from movies, but it's much easier to just go along and make the best of things. And that's what people do. The problem is the more you do that, the more you give your power and your freedom over to a group of people who don't have your best interests at heart, despite the fact that they keep saying it. I remember the movie V for Vendetta, where everybody's on lockdown. They've got a curfew. They've got to be in home at the same time. And as they're telling people that a yellow coded curfew is now in effect, this is for your protection. Wait a second. Taking away my freedom is for is for my protection. No, thank you. Right. And there's a meme that I keep seeing over and over and over again, which is the people, if you're trying to figure out who the good guys and the bad guys are, the bad guys are the people who are trying to censor people's speech and trying to, silence people, because that is the good guys don't do that. We want open discourse. Let's have conversations, which is why, as Bobby Idaho had commented on here, God bless Elon, where would we be in the world of information if Elon Musk had not bought Twitter? The man is flawed. He's not perfect, but where would we be without him is a really good question. America would be in a much worse place, but the world, the fact that he's even protecting freedoms for people in other countries who are just trying to speak truth is one thing. Because as much as Zuckerberg is trying to convince the world that he believes in free speech now that Trump is president, I don't buy that for one second. He is in with the global elites for sure, the global parasites, he's full on board with that. There have been a couple comments in here, so I don't know if it's time to shift to this, but one of the questions that was asked was, does Conor McGregor have a chance in Ireland? And I'll give you a chance to say something about that if you want to, because obviously,
well, you hung out with a guy, didn't you?
What's that?
Didn't you have a chance to hang out with him a little bit? I heard.
I went to an event that was at a pub he owns where Tucker Carlson had interviewed Conor that day, and Tucker was at the pub. Now, I showed up late because I was a little under the weather from exhaustion that week, but I ended up going later, and I'd never met him before, and I haven't seen him since. But I did go into the pub, and it was a couple hundred people who were there to support, our freedoms, not complying our way out of tyranny, people who are on the same page. And I did get to meet Conor. Now, the question is, does he have a chance in Ireland? And I'm assuming the question is about him running for president. Now, to run for president in Ireland, it's not like the US where it's a true democratic system. In Ireland, you have to get the approval of, I believe it's 4 county councils in Ireland. So in Ireland, there are 32 counties in total if you include the north and south, but in the Republic, there's only 26. And out of those 26 counties, 4 of them have to fully support you as a presidential candidate, or you have to get support of a certain number of people in Parliament. Now, people in Parliament are, they're completely captured. They're all a uniparty, even though there's Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin. They're really just, different wheels on the same car, or perhaps it's a better expression is different cheeks on the same arse. And they're all captured. So they're not going to support anybody like us who want truth. They will not support Conor, the people in the government. In fact, they're terrified. They're terrified of Conor, his visit to the White House on St. Patrick's Day. I think it was this first St. Patrick's Day that the Irish Taoiseach did not get an invite. He went over the week before, and Conor McGregor went in on St. Patrick's Day, which is, for anyone who's Irish listening and American, you would know that the Irish Taoiseach going over to hand the shamrock over on Patrick's Day is a significant diplomatic event. So that was a real blunt force trauma to the establishment in Ireland. They didn't get an invite. And the other thing is they hold on one sec. I have a little boy. Go to daddy. One sec. Mommy's on a podcast. Just go to daddy. Go around the other way. To keep my kids off camera. And there's a noise on the roof. It's probably a crow or something. So back to Conor. So the establishment got a real sort of kick in the teeth when he went over to the White House, and then also when Tucker flew over, they really got terrified about that. So that was they even said for the Lord Mayor of Dublin, they might not. Something about I think they may not run that as something to vote on because they're afraid he was going to run. I mean, they do not want him anywhere near the president's role or any part of influence in Ireland.
I kind of have a question because it's something that I think we struggle with a little bit here, and I think hopefully as we move forward, Chuck and I are going to be part and parcel to figuring out what that is, and that is, how is it that we connect the grassroots conservative movement with those that are the elected officials that are supposed to be the ones representing that conservative voice? And we here in Maine, at least up to now, seem that we do have a disconnect. And I think we're getting closer. Like the GOP here just announced that they're going to start getting involved in these school board races. And I think much of that has to do with the focus that myself and some others, like Nick Blanchard, have brought onto these school boards and showing up, getting shut down, get our speech shut down, thrown out, or restrained, or do whatever. And, it's starting to create a stir. And so it seems that they've been interested and they want to start putting their toe in the water on that. So I'm kind of encouraged by that. But I'm just wondering how you see that in Ireland and whether there's any hope that you see for us here in Maine of how to achieve that.
Yeah. So sorry, I had a little 6-year-old racing through. I hope I understood the question. Well, now that he's gone, it's quiet. So how to have the grassroots link into the government, how to make that connection?
How do we get those two things connected?
Yeah. Good question. Really good question. And we're still working on that, but we have made really significant progress in that. For example, we send a lot of letters we do letter campaigns, our groups do, to the TDs and the senators and the ministers. So we do a lot of letter campaigns. It could be, for example, when the CAST report came out, they all got a letter demanding that we follow in Ireland the best practice, the medical best advice of the CAST report. Now the UK Supreme Court ruling came out about 2 weeks ago. That ruling stated that sex is based on biological sex. So a woman is based on biological sex, not how a man feels. Imagine that. That had to go to the Supreme Court. Lots of time and money I could have saved them to tell them that. But we'll be sending a letter to all of the government here on, you need to follow the UK Supreme Court ruling that a woman is based on biological sex. Men should not be competing against women in sports. So we send them a lot of letters, and sometimes you think you're banging your head against the wall and you think that, there's going to be no progress, but it's almost like, for anyone in Maine listening, my dad used to go out in the forest and saw down, trees, and he had a sawmill, and we lived off the land. And, you could be sawing a tree down and it could take like 99 saws and it's not moving. But on that 100th, saw, the tree falls down, timber, so it's like, keep going. You have to never give up in building bridges, but you also have to build relationships, because the media in Ireland, and I'm not sure how it is in Maine, they have gone out relentlessly to vilify people like myself who have influenced the public, who've campaigned. And they don't really know what box to put me in because I'm American. That probably gets them a little bit confused. Where do we put this one? And I speak with love. I don't speak with hate. I speak with respect. I speak the truth. I back up everything with evidence. And they can't stand that. So the media goes out and tries to completely vilify us. When we did the library book campaign, they even had a big public meeting, a county council meeting, and they spent 30 minutes talking about how the extreme far right extremist went into libraries spreading hate, transphobia, the bigots. And we sent them copies of the books, and we're like, these are the books we want to get out of the libraries. This is not hateful at all. We're just simply normal, concerned mothers and fathers. But the media has done such a job really going after people like myself. If you Google my name, I mean, you think I'm a terrorist, arsonist, extremist, I mean, far right, whatever the media has said. That's what they've done. So you have to build relationships with your politicians. And we've started to do that really well over the last couple of years, where we had a meeting last summer with someone from the senator's office. And we reviewed all of the content of the college course that the teacher went on. We reviewed what's happening in schools. We were very logical. We had retired principals there. We had teachers there, mothers, fathers, researchers, doctors. And the more you can meet with people to show them that you're simply, speaking the truth and you're rational, they realize, oh, the media is misrepresenting you. So I guess in summary, it's never give up. Keep sending those emails, but with facts and evidence and being respectful, and keep having those meetings. We also, in addition to building the bridges with the government, the most important thing I can say campaigning for the last 5 years is to build a really strong grassroots movement of people. Because if you look at numbers, it's big people, small government. And the senator's office we met with said the best way to stop what's happening in school is to get a lot of angry parents. That will stop it tomorrow. That will stop it. So what we did is we took that advice and we've gone out and done thousands of leaflets. We had some generous father donate a big speaker system to myself. It's in the room here, where I bought a trolley and I dragged that speaker around with leaflets or placards, and I've gone all over the city speaking the truth with this speaker system and my placards and leaflets. And it's made such a difference because busy parents with the cost of living crisis, both parents are working. They don't have time to go on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or anywhere else. They don't know what's happening in schools.
Yeah.
The books get locked away. So in Ireland, the books are purchased by the government. The books get locked away at school. The children are asked to sign a class contract, secrecy pact. What happens in the classroom stays in the classroom.
An NDA?
And
Are you kidding me? They're non-disclosures?
yeah, it's in the books. We have all the books. We've seen them. Anyone thinks it doesn't sound real. When I first started campaigning, it sounded so surreal when you started talking to people about it. They would actually completely think you're a crank. You're making this up. I brought the school books around in a backpack with me, in a rucksack. And if I started asking parents, I always say to people, the other piece of advice, in addition to build the relationships with the government, build a groundswell people movement at a grassroots level, is also have 5 a day. That's not your 5 fruit and veg. That's 5 conversations. So you may not want to host a big event. You may not want to pass out leaflets or get on a podcast or do anything like that. But if you can have 5 conversations a day, those 5 people will talk to 5 more people each. That's 25. They talk to 5 more. They talk to 5 more. You've hit thousands in a week by 5 a day. I had a really great 5 a day one day last summer in the barber shop. There were 5 mummies there with their little boys getting haircuts. And I just went up and said, so what do you all think about what's happening in the schools? Blank stares. What do you mean? Well, you've seen the genderbread person? Who? I'm like, yeah, there's a genderbread person in your child's school book that says your child can become a boy, girl, neither, or both. They can even be non-binary. And the jaws dropped. And they're like, I don't believe it. Of course, I got my rucksack off and said, actually, I happen to have the book in my bag. Have a look. By the end of that 30-minute haircut, all 5 of those mummies said, "Can you go to our school gate with leaflets?" They
Oh,
were all on
Mm.
board, and it spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
So people need to start talking. COVID stopped people talking.
Yeah.
It locked people in their house. People were, isolated. Those days are gone, and we need to get the truth out by having conversations with people.
I will tell
Just
you.
open up the chat.
Yeah, I will tell you that what is driving these people in MSAD 11, they are trying to install a school-based health clinic, which they say will not offer gender-affirming services, but they will via a referral system. They're just playing three-card Monty here, right? And they're and so and the other thing is it's crazy because they have 10 people. They eat up the clock because they get 2 minutes each in a 20-minute public comment period. So they get all their supporters there to eat the clock up. And, they get up there and one after the other, they're all LGBTQ plus AI advocates. Well, I mean, it would if you say that it isn't about transgender care, then why did all these people care so much about it? Right. And that's and these are 80-20 issues. 8 out of 10 people you put this in front of, they will cringe when they see the book that you are presenting to them. They will have a visceral reaction to it because it's wrong. So
Well, and
activating.
and you say it's 80-20, but I just want to pipe in real quick and say 80-20 today. But if you turn back the clock 10 years, it's 95-5, right?
Yeah.
What's crazy to me is that this even 20% of the people, which may even be a high end estimate, but even still, even if it's like 15 or 10, like it's crazy that so many people have bought into this, and that speaking truth is now, causing some people to be labeled as terrorists and other things like that. Just speaking truth and standing up for children, like this idea that being honest, open and honest about what's really going on in our world is we're the ones that are the problem is crazy. But anyway, yeah.
And the other thing I would tell anyone listening, in addition to, we talked about build bridges with your politicians, be in their office every day. I don't know if you have clinics over there, but we have the TDs and the counselors have clinics where the public can walk in and present concerns. Doorstep them, get into them as much as you can. Write them letters.
Yeah.
They are our public reps, so we pay their wages. They work for us. They don't work for Bill Gates or the WHO or the United Nations. Our politicians work for us. So get into their faces, get into their offices, and have those respectful conversations. Build the grassroots movement. Have 5 conversations a day. But the most important thing, I think, is to have no fear. Once you park the fear and think, like, what's the worst case scenario? I talk to someone, I tell them what's in the school. The worst case scenario is they walk off. Oh,
Right.
okay, my feelings won't be hurt. Or they disagree with me. We have a good debate, always up for that. So what's the worst thing that can happen if you start talking and you speak up for your children? I mean, these are your children. The state does not own your children yet. The state can't do things behind your back yet. But that day will come. And in Australia, it's happened. There was a mother in Australia. I did a podcast recently with a lovely lady in Australia who we've partnered with, and she's doing fantastic work. A lady in Australia, a trans activist, came to her house and wanted to take her child. And she said, "No way, get out of my house, get off my property." They rang the police. The child came downstairs, and the trans activist was there, and they must have been grooming them online, or somehow they joined this cult. And the child left with this trans activist, and they had the right to do that. And the mother's not seen her child since.
Wow. Well, they do the same thing here in Maine. Is they make the parents a danger because if they don't affirm, obviously now they are a danger to the child, right? And so that's the wedge that they drive between the parents and the child. And by the time the child is presented back to the parent, they've already, had their pronouns changed and they're well on their way to doing whatever. And they introduce them as this is Tammy now. It's not Tommy anymore, And so, and it's amazing that when you tell people, they do not believe what it is that they're telling them. and that that it's reality. I mean, all we've done is expose. We have this great thing called Freedom of Access Act in Maine, and let me tell you, all you have to do is say, tell me about any communications on your public devices between you and so and so. We get 2 hours free, and it is been a huge weapon, because all we're doing is presenting these people's own words back against them, right, and exposing them for
Yeah.
being the liars that they are. Because when you hide agendas and when you want to get things done in secret and you don't want eyes on it, that's because you're doing nefarious things. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. If you have nothing to hide, you should be transparent. And what's happening in the class, I mean, from the books being locked away, the secrecy pact, and then the ex-minister former minister of education, Norma Foley, wants to spend 9 million euros on phone pouches to lock the children's phones up because children were taking pictures or videos of what they're being taught, and they don't want parents to hear that. So, I mean, this is really sinister, and parents really need to wake up
Yeah.
soon, because now what's happening in schools, do you have the conversion therapy? For example, if a child goes to a doctor and says, I think I'm a boy, but I think I'm really should be a girl, does the doctor have to take an affirmative approach, or can they explore the reasons and treat the
No,
child
it's affirming.
properly?
Practically, I think they legally can, but largely the practice is more like, practically most of them just do. Like, we had a story, like, you talk about doing things without parental consent. I had somebody on this podcast. She's been very vocal since this happened to her, where she was given her daughter. She found out her like 15-year-old daughter had been, or maybe it was younger than that, 13 something, had been given chest binders by a school social worker without her consent. And she also shared that she went to the doctors and they were having a regular checkup, and the doctors seemed to care about every aspect about her daughter's health until this question came up. And then after that, every aspect, the only thing the doctor cared about was this issue, and was really strongly pushing to, you need to go to a clinic, one of these gender affirming clinics, and you need to, if you don't affirm your daughter, she's going to commit suicide or harm herself, right? And like, this is with her daughter in the meeting. And so, like, practically, I think the vast majority of doctors are on board with gender affirming care, regardless of whether I know in Canada that they're required to be, like, you don't have a choice, but here I don't believe that they're legally required to give gender affirming care, but yeah.
In Ireland, at this point in time, the doctors, if a child presents with gender confusion, and years ago there was no gender confusion, this is clearly a socially engineering children. That's what it's doing. It's socially engineering them. It's all under the umbrella of Marxism, creating the oppressor. So the only way, when you're oppressed, the only way to get out of being oppressed is to join the minority, so become trans or be an ally. And that's how they capture the whole classroom. I mean, Mao's China, Hitler's youth. Now we have this trend. And so the children are all being indoctrinated in the class. But at this point in Ireland, the doctors do not have to take an affirmative care. They would, if a child presents with gender confusion from this social engineering and social contagion, the doctor would try to understand why. And generally, there's underlying conditions. Like, an article came out in the mainstream about a year and a half ago. It said up to 90% of people in Ireland seeking gender services may be on the autistic spectrum. So 90%. I saw another article that said 50%, but let's just say it's over half. So, in the NHS in England, they're looking to, before a child gets affirmed for their gender, is to test them for autism. And we know that RFK is looking at why autism rates are skyrocketing. We certainly know that a lot of that is linked to what's going in the body, all those heavy metals and poisons. But so where was I going with this? So in Ireland, there's a law on the table that has not passed yet, but you can be sure they'll try to pass it. It's the Prohibition of Conversion Therapy of 2018. It's only 2 pages long. It's very short bill. But what this bill states is that if anyone presents with gender confusion, their gender identity, gender expression, they must be affirmed, or the professional, which includes the educator, psychologist, counselor, doctor, can be fined up to €10,000. So if I'm a teacher in school, or guidance a counselor, and a child who goes through a class, so they're sitting in class, normal healthy child who goes to school in the morning, they sit through a class that basically says you can be a boy, girl, neither, or both, and everyone who gets transed, of course, gets celebrated. They feel a bit confused. Maybe they're different. Maybe they're vulnerable for whatever reason. They're also going through puberty, which is never easy. So they go to the counselor at school or teacher. In today's world, they can have an explorative approach, a holistic approach to the child's confusion. If this passes, it's an affirmative approach, or that teacher can be fined.
Well, and just to be clear, because
So that's horrendous.
I want to I think it's the way the war on language is really interesting here, and so there's something that you've said. You've used the word conversion therapy, right? And conversion therapy seems to suggest that I would think that's encouraging somebody to change their gender would be conversion, but conversion therapy is actually the way that you're using it is really affirming that a child is who they are, right? That if they're a boy, they're biologically a boy, then they're a boy, right? But according to this, that's conversion, that you're trying to convert them to something that they're not. Am I right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's banning conversion therapy. So it used to be put in place for if somebody, for example, was homosexual and presented as I'm gay, it would stop them from saying, no, you're not gay, you're straight, and trying to persuade them they're straight, which made sense. That person should not be made to feel they're wrong because maybe they're same-sex attracted. But now they've added gender identity. So what that means is if someone comes in and says, I'm confused, I think I'm a man, they cannot. They're banning the conversion therapy, trying to stop them from converting them to their way. It's hard to explain. It's a bit inverted.
It's backwards. It's because it's backwards thinking. It's hard to explain.
They can't. It's banning conversion therapy. Yeah. So it sounds a bit backwards, but it's stopping that doctor from trying to convert their way of thinking is the best way to think of it. So stop trying. They can't stop their way of thinking. So if you tell me you think you're a woman, I can't convert your way of thinking. I have to just go with it and affirm you as a woman.
Yeah. You have to affirm the person's psychosis, and you cannot attempt to restore them to what has been normalcy for thousands of years.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and more to the point is it just opens up the door, because you could just be asking questions, just trying to figure out what's going on and help them walk through it. But somebody else might decide, no. This is conversion therapy. Now you're going to lose your license, right? Because you just ask questions just to make sure that they understand what it is that they're doing. It's like one of some of these silly things, really silly things that they do in politics, in legislation, I should say, is I used to work in banking, and this is a kind of connects if you can follow me. But I used to work in banking, and one of the things that I was not legally allowed to do was if somebody came in to apply for a loan and I thought that it would be a bad idea for them, I could not tell them that, right? I could not say, hey, based on what you're telling me, here's the situation. This, in your situation, this is generally speaking what's going to happen. Here's the pros and because they could argue that I was trying to discourage somebody from doing something, and basically to stop them from getting approved, essentially. Which, again, if somebody's got a really bad credit score, they're definitely not going to be approved. It's not going to help them. There's no benefit from it. I cannot do that, because then I would be denying access. And it's one of those things where they're the often laws that are meant to protect actually end up creating more harm than good, because instead of being able to give good advice, I was actually restricted from being able to give good advice, all in the name of helping people. Again, this is why we shouldn't trust the government, limited government, small government, because the government doesn't do anything well except for control people, I guess you could say. But we don't want them to control people.
No, let me just jump in for a real quick second, because you talked about a number of pillars that you're doing over there in Ireland, and you talked about the court systems are very corrupt, and I just wanted to share that one of the pillars that I've taken is trying to exploit the lawfare that they're using against me by turning around and saying, Oh, okay. All right. You really want to go there. You think you're going to intimidate me with this, but maybe I'm not going to show up, whatever. No, 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 no. We're going to dance. And I'm going to file motions and countersuits against you for bringing this case because all you're trying to do is violate my civil right of free speech. And because of the zeitgeist that we've got going on in this country right now, and the people that are being silenced at school board meetings, and that's where we're getting a lot of traction. YouTube and X and all this, the people are just going off and popping off, and they're reading these books right out, and then they go, no, you can't read that here. Okay, why? Because it's offensive, but yet you're letting the children read it. And so what I've done is
Yeah.
is 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 said, all right, if you're going to do this, I'm not going to be afraid. We live in a world where I have way more tools than I did before, and then I'm speaking about artificial intelligence to help me prepare a legal case. And I went at this thing pro se, so it's not going to burn me up. And I'm like, if you want to play, then I'm going to drag you screaming into the light under oath, and I'm going to make you answer questions. And that's all recorded on audio by the court. And so what's happened is is that they don't understand, the women don't, these activists, they don't understand the law. They understand that they want to get the judge to empathize with them, and literally in court saying, it's just not right that people would be able to exclude others, and that's not inclusive and that's not loving. And I'm going, oh, you're making a political argument. You're not making a legal argument here. And so far, I have been fortunate enough that the judges, I think, all perked up when I said free speech, because we've had people been arrested for going 12 seconds over in Augusta at the school board meeting. We had Corn Pop shut down because you're not allowed to say anything negative, according to the chairperson, about any of the staff or any of the people in the school system. No negative comments will be allowed. Well, how in the world can you possibly say, I am unhappy with this? Well, you're not allowed. That's negative. You can't be unhappy. So they've bound us up so much, and this is going national. We're finding it's winding up on Fox News and things like that. So as soon as I said free speech, everybody went, ooh, and they started looking up the case law. And I said, we're going to see. And hopefully me digging my clutches into them and saying, I'm not afraid to engage with you this way, is going to produce things on the record that is going to hopefully be able to get people to resign, maybe, right? Make political change at the school board level. So,
Yeah, I mean,
we have school board meetings, but the board of management is a small group that the parents aren't allowed to attend that meeting. That's a very small group of about maybe 8 people. The principal, the reps, the board of management is a small group. There are parent association meetings, but I attended many of mine and tried to raise these issues. But one example, it was when the Minister for Children came out 2 years ago and said, we're going to bring transgender studies into primary school. I was like, no way. No, they're just learning to read and write. So I presented it to my own PA meeting, and I brought in the documents, and I started to just say, I have a concern. It came out in the news that they're going to be presenting, transgender studies into age 5. And rather than open up a healthy dialogue and ask questions and discuss it, the chair of the PA sort of clapped and said, it's just great. Everyone's going to belong. What's the next item on the agenda? And it was like, tea and biscuits for the communion or planting trees outside. And I'm going, these are young children getting preyed upon by the gender cultists, and young children who are going to be led down a path to think they're in the wrong body. They don't want to talk about it. The PA meetings are more for, the plants and the tea and the little activities. So you can't get in. So the best way is now to just write letters to the principal. So if you can't get into your board of management meeting or you're shut down, is write letters to the board of management, have them all on record, which I've sent many, everything from masking children at school to transgenderism to everything else. I send a lot of letters.
Physical letters, not emails.
I do emails, but I have sent some through registered post, but I have always gotten a response back on email. My school's been quite understanding of my views and my advocacy to protect my children.
They don't when they get flooded with a lot of emails and letters and things. And I can tell you right now that these women are complaining that, well, he's out there doing calls to action on Twitter. And then people are sending us letters and asking us to resign. And it's like, yeah. Well, and fortunately here we have some pretty strong laws too on the books that you cannot take out restraining orders against people to prevent them from going to a school board meeting. And the other thing is great is by law they have to broadcast the school board meetings. So these confrontations, we have the opportunity, and leftists do not think well on the fly. They don't. They operate from talking points rather than from logic. Therefore, you start getting them to engage, and if you do it correctly, you can really let people see what their agenda is and how wicked and really evil it is, and then they fall on their own swords.
Well, the reason that
we've had leftists show up. I was out at a street event presenting on the child protection a couple of years ago, and a trans activist, which was a man wearing a pink frilly dress and a thong and lots of piercings, poured water over me. And I didn't know if it was acid or urine or poison or what. It happened to, I think it was water. So anyway, he didn't like what I was having to say, so just thought it was appropriate to pour water over my head. And I went straight to the Gardaí, the police here, and he pled guilty in court last summer. I went to court and he pled guilty, but the judge was referring to him as Miss and she, and it's clearly a man. So to actually have a judge play into the gender ideology, I thought, wow, this is madness. But they think they can be violent and try to shut down free speech or cancel events by sending 200 vicious, threatening emails. But because we want free speech, they call us fascists, but they're the fascists. They're the agitators. And the other thing is, we've done a lot of events outside our parliament buildings, and when we do events, it's info sessions. We have speakers, we have teachers, parents, doctors, talking about the dangers of gender ideology, passing out leaflets and that. And we always have a crowd of the hard left across the road. They bring their bicycle horns, their dog whistles, their boom boxes cranked up, and they all have their blue hair and they're screeching really angry. And I've stopped my speeches before when they start chanting. All they really do is they chant. They say, trans rights are human rights, trans rights are human rights. I've stopped my speech and I've said, we're talking about children here. Can you tell us, come up to the mic, come on over and tell us, how does protecting children infringe on your rights? Do you think they've ever come up for a conversation?
Well, no, because they won't engage in an honest conversation with us. But partly because they don't, as we were talking about earlier, they don't know how to think on their feet. Partly because they're programmed, and so they can only they're like AI. AI can only do what it can find out there. It can't think on its own. I know that we call it artificial intelligence as though it's got sentience in sci-fi, but it's not. And these people, they're largely programmed. They haven't come to these conclusions by logic and reason and independent thought. They have been programmed, and because they've been programmed, they can't, that's why they can't think on their feet, and that's why they're not willing to engage. And a lot of times we have these people, and you see it when they do, when some of them try to engage in conversation, they end up saying something that's obvious, that demonstrates that they actually don't know how to effectively communicate about this. A great example actually is something where I was very surprised that one of our I think it's our newest Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, right? She was being questioned in her confirmation hearings about what a woman was, and she responded with, "Well, I'm not a biologist." Now, on the one hand, you would think that the left would have been upset with her because, wait, you're saying it's biological? Right? And it's that they're saying it has nothing to do with biology. It's about how you feel. Anybody who identifies as a woman, which is a circular argument that means nothing. If it's so important that we agree with you about what it is, you should be able to tell us what it is, right? But like, again, you have that situation where she clearly doesn't, like, what she's saying suggests that it is a biological issue, but they don't have a problem with it. But again, they don't know how to communicate about this because it doesn't make sense. Like, that's the bottom line.
Well,
It
no, I'm
does
not.
not make sense, especially with children. Like, it's in my opinion, it's crazy enough when you're dealing with adults who think, anybody who thinks they're in the wrong body, in the wrong gender, and like, these are people who are dealing, we need to have compassion, obviously, with these people. They're people who are dealing with, like, a lot of, like, probably past trauma and a number of other things. They're very confused. And but when you get to, like, what they're doing with children, which I think we've used the word, and I think it's accurate, grooming, when you're trying to manipulate children into believing something about themselves other than truth and reality, like, that is disgusting and horrible and evil. If somebody gets to the point where they're a full-fledged adult, they've gone through puberty, and they believe that they are something other than what they are,
Well,
and they're going to pursue it no matter what, that's another category. But when we're talking about children, that, like, the
here's,
idea of, like, yeah, anyway,
here's
go ahead.
the problem is that it is the ultimate separation from the idea that we are all created in the image of God. Because if you accept this mindset, then God got it wrong. And he gets it wrong a lot, seemingly, with all these Munchausen by proxy women that have fashion statements. I mean, what was the odds of a trans kid? One in 10,000 or whatever the heck it was. And it's like, now we've got people that have 2 and 3 of them. It's like lightning doesn't strike that many places in the same time. This is obviously the person that is grooming them.
I said a good analogy is, if someone boasts about having a vegan cat, well, we know who's pushing that agenda. The kid doesn't choose to be trans. The kid is being pushed in it. We call it in Ireland, we instead of Munchausen by proxy, we say Transhausen by proxy, because these moms want their, and the problem is, in Ireland, with a lot of issues, the working class, who have really felt the brunt of the government's disservice, are much more on board and awake to what's happening, because they don't have trust in the government that hasn't served them. The problem we're having in Ireland, if we were to look at which kind of class levels are pushing this, the problem is the middle class woman, and these are the problem. The ones who think, oh, it's really cool, I'm going to go to walk my little son up to school in a dress, and isn't it great, he wants to wear a lipstick or a wig, and oh, my little girl just got her mastectomy and it's so cool. And it's like, you carried your child in your womb for 9 months. It's actually nearly 10, 40 weeks. You carried this beautiful child in your womb. You felt them move. You watched them grow. You delivered the child. And when you first looked your child in the eyes, did you not think, my child is perfect and I love this child more than anything? How did you go from that moment to, my child's born in the wrong body, and I want to deny them a right to puberty, deny them a right to fertility, remove their body parts, give them drugs that cause bone damage, osteoporosis? How did you go from that moment, looking your child in the eyes when they were born, to this? I mean, that is child abuse. It's absolutely child abuse. It's somebody grooming that child to say that they're trans. A child isn't going to be born and say, I think I'm in the wrong body. I mean, I grew up in Maine. I was a tomboy. I rode a quad bike and snow machines and went out ice fishing with my dad and climbed trees and played in the rivers. If I was a child in Maine going through now or anywhere in the world, and they said, oh, if you don't like to wear dresses and makeup and do girly things, you're probably in the wrong body. Do you want to consider a transformation? Then you think, going through puberty, it's terrible. You're getting hips and breasts and menstrual cycles and cramps, and you feel awful and you're moody and you don't like your parents because you're rebellious, and somebody offers you a magic pill. You can look back and reflect and say, how easy it would have been to be pushed down that path. I was a tomboy girl, but now I couldn't be happier to be a woman and a mother and having 2 beautiful children. Imagine if someone had denied that of me. I mean, that's horrendous.
The detransitioners like Chloe Cole are living examples now of saying that, this was robbed from me and now I'm trying to rebuild whatever, but I can no longer do the things that, I wanted to do. I can't have children anymore, because these things, and they say they're reversible. They're all lying. You can't just take whatever God did and put it on hold and expect that you can
No.
turn it back on and it's all going to be fine.
Well, every scientific
and I went to a conference a couple of years ago.
No, I
Sorry,
was just
go
going to
ahead.
say really quickly, like every scientific thing where we try to tell the body to stop doing something that it naturally is supposed to do, tends to be bad for the body. So a couple of examples real quick is like, not deodorant, but antiperspirant. So antiperspirant puts little pieces of like, I think it's aluminum or something like that blocks the pores so that you don't sweat. That's part of what is antiperspirant, right? Well, this is linked to cancer. And there are a plethora of other examples of things where you're trying to tell your body, such as like omeprazole, I think is another one. You're trying to tell your body not to like produce acid the way that it's normally supposed to do. These things are all linked to cancer. It's bad for your body to tell it to not do something that it naturally is supposed to do. And what they're doing is that, but on steroids, right? With these hormone blockers, which are really like so experimental and dangerous. And so even so, it's possible. I don't really know. We're going to find out if some of these people who have taken these puberty blockers will be able to get pregnant eventually, if they detransition. But it's definitely not. It's definitely not something that we know for sure that they can, which is what the left is trying to spout. Oh no, it's fully reversible. They have no idea, because we don't have the data, and we shouldn't be experimenting on children anyway.
No.
I just wanted to jump in real quick, and because it's come up a couple of times, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the name of this program is Wartime Christianity, and I call myself a wartime preacher. And Richard and we spend a lot of time talking, and others, and one of the things that we're convinced of, and one of the things that I think that where I feel that I've been more effective is that I look at this thing as warfare. And Chuck and I talked a little bit about it, right? I don't merely look at the other side as someone to be reasoned with anymore. I don't look at them as someone that I can compromise with on any of these things. These are like hard no's, right? These are, don't pass go, don't collect $200, go directly to jail. And so since I've been treating this as warfare as opposed to politically trying to achieve something through incremental change, I'm saying, no, I want to destroy this thing hook, line, and sinker, tear it out by the root, get rid of it. I did not get involved in this to stop school-based healthcare clinic in MSA D11 in Gardner. I got involved in it to tear them out of the state and ultimately give a blueprint so that others around the world or in this country can tear it out by the root.
Yeah. Absolutely. We need to cut it off at the root, and people don't know where the root is. And I sent over some documents earlier. We may not have time to go through many tonight, but people can look up the United Nations, the UNESCO, which is driving the education across the West or across the world on this. The WHO standards of sexuality is worth anybody looking up. It's a public document. And on the WHO standards of sexuality, and the WHO, by the way, back to the root, the UNESCO and WHO shouldn't be anywhere near children. They're terrorist organizations. The WHO standards believe there's an age matrix, and teaching children at age 4 how to touch themselves for pleasure. So age 4 is preschool. How many parents want their preschooler to go into preschool and learn how to touch themselves for pleasure, masturbation? Not many parents should want their teacher talking to their child about that. On the matrix for age 9, the WHO standards of sexuality believe that we should teach age 9 in school about their first sexual experience. How many 9-year-olds are out there having sex? They shouldn't. The age of consent in Ireland is 17. So this age 9 having sex, I mean, that is anyone who puts that in a document and thinks having sex with children is okay is clearly, I mean, that there's something called pedophilia, and that's what it is. If you think having sex with children is okay. So most of the school system in Ireland uses the UNESCO documents and the WHO as the route to build the education. We've seen it referenced in the curriculum design. I don't know if it is over there in the US as well. But those documents are quite incriminating.
Yeah, I can bring that in real quick. Some of that, those let's see.
Close it
I
up.
think this is the UNESCO stuff that you're kind of talking about here, right?
Yep. Yep. So they call it comprehensive sex education. So comprehensive and evidence-based sex education. They state it needs to be integrated into all schools, and that includes the gender equality, which gender equality does not
Sorry.
mean equal rights for women. Gender equality, for anyone listening, we've done a podcast on what does gender mean. It's on our naturalwomenscouncil.com, and you can go to our YouTube channel. Breaks down what does gender really mean. Gender equality doesn't mean rights for women. It's rights for however someone feels. So this is coming from the UN, and that's infiltrated Irish schools. So they shouldn't be anywhere near schools. The United Nations, UNESCO.
Yeah.
There's also the WHO documents, which are pretty damning. But it'd be interesting to do vox pops. I haven't gone around and done those on the streets, but it'd be interesting to go around Ireland and do vox pops and say, hey, I just want to ask you, would you want your child to be taught about their first sexual experience at age 9 and just go around the streets and do little random interviews, or age 4 masturbation, or, age 5 gender identity? I mean, I bet most parents wouldn't, want that for their child, but people feel scared to speak up because they see the media, what they do to people who speak up. But that's where it comes down to what's more important, your child's safety or your popularity. And my child's safety and well-being comes far ahead of my popularity at the school gate. And, when you are the mom that speaks up and you have, a public presence or an influence, there are many mothers who, when they walk by you, their heads quickly turn the other way. Or if you're on the sports pitch and you walk there to see your child play, 4 or 5 moms might huddle really closely so their backs turn to you. But that's okay. That doesn't bother me. That's okay, because my children, and every child in Ireland and Maine and across the world, every child is more important than my popularity.
If you see, go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, like, and this is one of the problems that we have today. Well, when you look back at the world, I remember like World War II. It's a very shaping time for our world, but it's as an American, it's a time where we're really proud of what we were able to do in overthrowing the Nazis and other regimes. But we were able to do that because people were willing to put themselves on the line. They were like, we had so many people when after the attack at Pearl Harbor, so many people volunteered. They even volunteered for the Airborne Division and different things like that. Band of Brothers, if you haven't seen it, incredible. But you see the things that these people were willing to do to be able to protect the freedom and overthrow an evil empire, essentially, that was in the midst of forming. And today, unfortunately, we are a weak-willed people by and large. I think there are more people who are waking up and realizing, man, if I don't do something, things are going to get a lot worse. But there are still so many people that, one, don't want to believe it's happening, which is why we have podcasts like these to let people know, we share stories from people all around the state that are like, no, this happened to my daughter. This happened here. This happened there. You mentioned phones. I had somebody on the podcast, I think it was last week, who was talking about how a kid recorded the teacher in a classroom talking about, while he was teaching math, somehow he was getting into critical race theory and I don't think it was gender, climate change. And it's like, what the heck do those two things have to do with math? What is that doing there? It shouldn't be there. But people don't believe that this is happening. And that's where, like, I think engaging in that conversation like you're talking about is so incredibly important, because most people are ignorant of the fact that it's happening. And so they don't want to believe it's happening. But even if they do believe it's happening, they're afraid and they're not willing. They're willing. I mean, so many of us appear to be willing to let bad things happen to our kids and future generations, instead of being brave enough to speak up. I mean, our forebears went to war and died and had parts of their body lopped off, essentially lost as a result of what they did to defend our freedom. And this is what we're doing with that freedom. It's sad.
Yeah, exactly. And in Ireland as well, Ireland was oppressed, for 800 years, suffered through oppression. So, they tried to bring critical race theory into schools, and that's off the table at the moment. But they're bringing in a new program called Be Canalta, and Be Canalta means be kind in Irish. So they try to bring it in under a nice Irish language words that sound lovely. But Be Canalta, be kind, is replacing the school's anti-bullying policy. And this new policy, the anti-bullying policy they want to bring in, is basically a way to bring the LGBTQI plus in the back door. And if your child is gender critical and believes there's only two sexes and sex can't be changed, they're not kind, they're not being an ally, and they could actually be considered a bully for following the science and the facts. So we're going to be launching a campaign on Beacon Alta this week. So every parent in Ireland needs to be aware of what it really means, because once this is enshrined in the school policy, it's game over.
Yeah, I would agree. I do have a question, and I want to give you, before I leave, you're definitely a lioness. So I want to give you the lioness roar there, but I wanted to ask you, are you seeing more men getting involved? Because I think what we're having over here is we've got some of the return of the patriarchy, and some of the fathers are getting involved, and they're getting angry. Okay, and they're showing up to these school board meetings, and I think these woke, white, college-educated women that are all responsible for this stuff are really having a difficult time dealing with that male energy. What do you see over there in Ireland?
Yeah, we've the same absolutely here. And in fact, we started out as a movement mostly 5 years ago in the COVID days, when we do hold the lines outside schools to get the masks off the children. It was all women, and primarily a lot of the protests and assemblies were all women. But we have seen a lot more men step up. And since that's happened, the media started talking about the two magic words, toxic masculinity. Yes. So the media started, toxic masculinity, and they even had, teachers who were very woke coming out and saying that, men shouldn't be the protectors and the providers anymore. And it's like, well, what's wrong with that? I was a very successful career woman. That's what moved me to Ireland. I was a senior manager. I had men who reported into me. So I'm not saying a woman can't have a career. I had one. But what I'm also saying is, if a woman chooses, like I did, to stay home and raise her children and not have them raised by the state, and you have, the luxury, and it is a privilege to stay at home, I understand that, then it doesn't mean you're less of a woman because you're not out there, working. Your job, raising your children and instilling their morals. So they are going after the men who are standing up saying it's toxic masculinity. But what I would say is, I wish that more men, I would call on all of the men, all the fathers out there, to where are you protecting your daughters? Where are you? Are you so scared by the strong woman out there that your masculinity has been stripped? And I used the phrase recently is, are your balls trickling down your trouser legs, men? Where are they? You are your
need another roar
protector.
there, I think.
You are the protector. Give me another roar there. So, I'm the parent in this family standing up for my children. And, many parents, also families, have divided views, and that's okay as well. It's okay if you have a divided view from your own children's, father, or if you're the father, a different view than the mother. You still look your children in the eye, and you still stand up for them, even if their other parent doesn't. That's okay.
Yeah, I think we definitely need men. This is the fight, men. Stand up and be willing to fight. Like if we're afraid to be called toxic for standing up for our children, standing up for our daughters, because I mean, the women, interestingly enough, in this, the women are the ones that are the most negatively impacted, because they're the majority of the people who are being transitioned, right? Is usually women, and it has a lot to do with the fact that puberty is much more traumatic for women than it is for men. All of a sudden, they start bleeding. As you kind of said, the hips widen, like all these other, like their breasts start growing, and then they've got this flurry of hormones, and now they're very different. And like, that's just like a crazy thing, which, one of the things about the gender cult is they're like, well, if you feel uncomfortable in your own gender, maybe you're the other gender. It's like, who goes through puberty and feels comfortable. Like nobody. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm a guy
Yeah.
and it was weird for me, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a lot harder for women. And so women are more likely to be the ones that are groomed into this. And so if we're unwilling to, so women are more negatively impacted by these horrible ideologies and these horrible policies that are pushed forward. And if we're not willing as men to stand up for women who are in these vulnerable young girls, then we are not men. So
Yeah.
that's like, you're not a man.
No.
You
Did
may
you
have genitalia, but you
Exactly.
are not a man. So,
did you know?
Yep. Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
that. I have lost so much respect for the men's out there who are cowering or calling women names because they're defending children, or they just don't want to know. I have lost any man out there not standing up for their children. They do not have my respect. Zero. They haven't earned it. So men need to get up and stand up. You're supposed to be the protectors. We're the nurturers. We have that maternal mama bear
wait, men and women are
instinct.
different. I'm
Mama
just
bear. I say mama bear is a nice word for saying if you come near my child, I'm going to skin your insides out. That's mama bear. But we
Well,
need the men. Like, we really need the men. Masculinity is not
yeah. Well,
toxic.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I believe that you like him. He said just the other day that an average man of 62 years old, my age, actually 68, I think is what the number was, has more testosterone than the average 18-year-old at this point. And I thought, wow, if that's really true, we're like doomed. Okay, because like look at me, right? I walk into a room, okay, and I scare small children and women because just these days, because of, right, like look at, you want to talk about toxic masculinity. This is all it. Usually I things on all the fingers too, okay? So, people have definitely have a reaction to that, these days. And, and what I've found is it's triggering them, right? And when it triggers them, then they become irrational. They become irrational. We show the world, and then people learn and people see things, and hopefully it brings light and heat down upon them, and they don't like it. Look, I don't like negative attention, and I'm comfortable with conflict. I don't like the kind of negative attention that I have lately. It's taking up a lot of my time, and I'm having to go do things that I don't want to do, and they're not comfortable, and spend money and all this kind of stuff. But in the end, I have realized that what God threw into my lap here, potentially, if I win these cases, if I lose these cases, then essentially precedent will be set legally that says if you don't like something somebody's saying online about something like an SPHC, you can now silence them. I cannot lose this case. This case is so important that I realize that God dropped these in my laps, that this is going to be my legacy. This will impact generations to come because it's case law. And just like I looked it up online, others will be able to see my case when I win it. And hopefully it will put an end, because it is so decisive what has happened here that nobody will ever try it again in the state of Maine.
Yeah.
No, good. It needs to be, as you said, to get the rot at the root of the tree gone. You need to just chop it down. And once it's gone, it will never come back. But everyone in Maine needs to get behind you. Everyone needs to say these cases have to win. And if people know the cases are happening, maybe they can do an assembly outside the courthouse. They can publicize it. You can really get a groundswell support, because I don't think many parents want this. When I went back to Maine to see my mom last summer, I was surprised to see that Maine was one of the blue states, because in the area that I'm from, people still had family values. They weren't hanging these progressive genital mutilation flags. They didn't believe in any of this. But I wonder, population wise, is it because the cities have gone woke? Because I didn't feel it in Rockland, Maine, or Union, Maine, or, in my mid-coast area. People have taken their kids out of school to homeschool them, and they still all have guns, and they're like, nobody's taken my home. So I was like, this is where I want to live. So I was surprised to see that Maine was so woke, and I'm wondering, is it the cities that are weighing the population, the wokeness.
In our country in general, it's a battle of the rural versus the urban, right? Like the cities largely vote blue, the country, as we sometimes call it, but the rural neighborhoods largely vote more conservative. And here in Maine, the vast majority of the population. So, like, if you look at geographically, the vast majority of the land area is conservative, but the population centers are largely are largely liberal. And so we like, I live in southern Maine. I'm not originally from here. We used to jokingly call this area northern Massachusetts because it's more like Massachusetts and how liberal it is versus the rest of Maine, which I think there's a significant portion of Maine that would rather either be part of New Hampshire or just be its own state, that we would call Maine, and that we would call this portion of Maine northern Massachusetts. I think that's what we would have. That's how we would have it. But yeah, it's very much more liberal. But also it's been ramped up because of COVID. Some of the things that have happened during COVID are like all the people moving into Maine. So Maine is a great place to live in a lot of different ways because it's smaller, and there's a lot less of crime and different things like this going on. But Portland still has many of the amenities that a city would have. So you get most of what you like. And if you really want something that you got to go to a big city for, Boston's only a couple hours away, hour and a half or so. And so, like, because of that, you've got tons of people who have moved here from Democrat areas like Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, California. And then the other side, there are a lot of people from like Portland, from Oregon and Washington, which are very northwestern states, very liberal. But they've moved here because, again, even though it's expensive for the people living here, people are able to sell their homes there, buy a house in cash here, and work remotely and different things like that, or people retiring early. And so that has caused an influx of a bunch of liberal people. And even though, like, okay, so Trump lost Maine, for instance, by like 6.5%, right? Which is not like a huge amount, especially considering the fact that he barely campaigned here, because it wasn't an important state for him to be able to win the electoral college. You got to win the electoral college, not Maine. So he didn't really focus here. If he had really focused here, it's a lot tighter. But policy-wise, we're one of the most extreme in some of the stuff that we're talking about. Again, at 16, you can, without parental consent, get get transgender treatment all the way to the top, right? That's crazy, and it's one of the most extreme policies out there. And that's here, in the state of Maine, despite the fact that we're really more of a purple state. So this has caused a significant portion of your conservatives to just be like, I don't want to deal with this state. So in rural areas, more they're pulling their kids out of school. They're doing it some down here in the Portland area too. But I've seen so many really strong conservatives say, I'm moving to Texas, I'm moving to Florida, but I'm moving somewhere other than Maine because I don't want to raise my family in an area where they're trying to do this to my kids, and they're trying to do this to kids in general. They see it as a lost cause. Unfortunately, we're not that far away. It's not a lost cause, but it gets much more difficult as people move away, and now we've got to convert more people to help them understand what's really going on. And so it's really challenging. But that's really what's going on here in the state of Maine.
And I was surprised, sorry to interrupt there. I was really surprised seeing some Facebook posts with people assembling in Maine and protesting, saying hands off. And they're protesting, is it they're angry with Trump because he's defunding schools because Janet Mills is so woke, or what exactly was all that about?
They're angry at Trump because they have TDS and the media told them to. That's the real reason that they're angry with Trump, right? But the claim, like, it's hands off. I mean, part of it probably has to do with that shenanigan. They're also, a lot of them, they're mad at Elon Musk. And what's interesting is when Elon Musk and Trump collectively cut government jobs, they're like, these people lost their jobs without warning. And first of all, two things: they're given like a 2 years worth of pay severance, so they're fine. Don't worry about them. But secondly, if they're doing a job that's not useful to the government, your main concern shouldn't be that oh my gosh, these people just lost their job. Like, are they doing something productive and helpful for our government? Well, if they're not, then I don't care. Like, even if they didn't have like an immediate job to jump to, like if you're sucking if you're draining the resources of our state just to have a job, I like go away. You deal with
Well,
the consequences of being a parasite, right?
it's
Like that's number one. But so they were upset about that, and then they were upset about the Mills situation, and yeah, blaming Trump for the fact that Mills was violating federal law.
it's the same thing. It's weaponized empathy in all of these
Yeah.
cases, right? You're made to want to care or should care about some guy who worked in an office somewhere that was really working from home and he really wasn't contributing anything over your own circle of people that you should be concerned with, because empathy starts with first, my wife, and then, my animals, and then my neighbor, and then my community, my town, right? And then my state. And so I just generally don't care about some guy that is, from in some other country somewhere more. Like, and I don't care about the trans person more than my daughter or your daughter that might be offended when they're going into that room. That is the correct order of empathy. And I don't know if you are aware of Alvin Louis. He does Courage is a Habit. Is his branding, okay, in this fight. And so he's the one that actually educated me on the school-based health clinic. I didn't even know what a MSAT 11 was until I met him last October. And then, he told me all about this stuff, just like you educated us on the 6 stuff they're doing already at 9 and 3 and 4 and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I was just like, what? And, having lost both my daughters in the culture wars, they changed their pronouns, one of them, and moved someplace, and the other one, they're all with their allies. Okay. They're allies. And so I lost my kids. And so I made it my, some people volunteer down at the homeless shelter, the soup kitchen, or do whatever when they're old. Okay. Me, I'm going to pour out myself as a drink offering, protecting future kids. I wasn't able to protect mine. Right. That's my motivation. That's why I do it, But I think a lot of people got activated in 2020 when the government just went nuts.
Yep.
And we all just went, whoa, right? I think that's what spurred on a lot of us, political activism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that people realized, for saying, in Ireland, don't mix. They had people in what they called pods, and if you're vaccinated, you can have this many people in your pod. If you're not, you can have this many people, but you can't cross contaminate. And if you see your neighbor, with a car in their driveway that isn't theirs, you can call the police on your neighbor to report that they have cross contamination in their pod. And people were calling the Gardaí, the police, on their neighbors to say, we think someone's at the house that shouldn't, all these curtain twitchers. And you think, how did people get to think this was okay? I mean, that is inhumane. That's just, it's insane. So I think people have sort of, in Ireland, after the COVID injection in 2021 rolled out, we have over 22,000. There's a group that tracks excess deaths on irelandexcessdeaths.com. And we've had, based on what's projected for deaths versus what's happened from the RIP.ie, which is all the obituaries, they've scraped all the data. And there's over 22,000 premature deaths, empty chairs at the dinner table since 2021. So if your government cares so much about public health and safety and children, and they're all about kindness, why are they ignoring 22,000 bereaved families and thousands more who have lifelong injuries due to this shot? They're completely ignoring all of it.
Insanity.
So I think that's woken up a lot of people. I have a lot of people who were not on my side in the COVID days when I said kids shouldn't be wearing masks and we shouldn't be having these vax passes to eat in restaurants. I've had dozens of people come to me and say, you were right and we should have listened. And I have compassion for those people. I don't have judgment. They had their journey. They're injured or they've lost family members. I have compassion for them. I hold the space, but it's not the people we should be angry with. It's the government that facilitated all of this, the same way the government is facilitating all of this now, even with the NGOs they're paying to push the transgender ideology and everything else. They're paying these. I mean, these are ideologues. So these people running around, self-loathing people who don't know if they're a man or a woman. They're men in dresses. They have, the blue hair. They're screeching. They're transing their kids. they're just pawns in the game. The real anger should be at the government because they're facilitating and funding
I agree.
it.
And I always said that I have great compassion for people that are confused in that way. I really do. It's got to be awful, right? But this isn't the way to solve it, is to tell them, yeah, you're really a lizard or you're really a cat or whatever it is you think, delusion that you have. Listen, guys, I can't believe we ate up 2 hours. I scheduled mine for 2 hours. So my live stream died 3 minutes ago. So I kind of got to get going anyway. This was a long day for me. So I wanted to say thank you so much. I enjoyed meeting you, speaking with you. I hope to meet you in person someday. You were delightful to talk to, and I just love your Irish lilt. It was delicious. I loved it. So,
It's great to talk to you as well. And I'm sure we can do another discussion where maybe, I know we only sent you those less than, about an hour just before this started. We sent loads of slides. I didn't get to send them earlier, but maybe have a look at those slides my researcher has put together, sort of where it's all coming from, and maybe pick out a few you want to talk about. We could probably spend an hour just going through some of those slides. They're really kind of well done, very clear to read. They have books to reference and stuff. So we can maybe do part 2 and then do an hour on some of those slides that I sent over, or that Eugene sent over a couple hours
agreed.
ago.
Absolutely.
I'm all in for it. I really want to be a part of it because you took the time to prepare it. And of course, you never know how these interviews are going to go. And I think it flowed really well. And we just touched on so many subjects today, like the ones they didn't even talk about.
And we should talk about, if we do a conference in Maine, we can talk about as well, like what all the groups we have working together here and across the globe, what would make a meaningful conference? Like, what could I bring to Maine? What would that day look like? Who would be the target audience? How would we market it to make sure it's really meaningful for everyone attending, and make sure it's action oriented? So we can talk about that.
Beautiful. And I'd like you to come to the Gardner School Board meeting right before school starts up in August.
I would love to come in. I know Gardner very well. I know Gardner very well. I'd love to come into any school board meeting anytime.
Good. All right, guys. Thank you.
All right.
I'm crashing a party tomorrow night as well. I'm going to a school tomorrow where a book author comes in to talk about child mental health, safety, well-being online. But this same person coming in to talk about safety online, which is really pushing the digital ID, he has written books that are so highly sexual in the classroom. It's unreal. So I bought 4 tickets to his event. I'm going to go there with those books, and I'm going to get on that microphone like I did at his last one in front of 600 people. It was a real truth bomb. So tomorrow night's a real fun night.
Oh, nice.
All right. Enjoy. Hopefully there'll be video of that
party,
can get shared.
Yeah, they said no filming is on the rules, and they also didn't put his name on the ticket event because there's been so many complaints about him based on our exposure. He booked it under just the title, but it didn't have his name on it. I only found out he's going tomorrow night because a friend of mine has children in that school. So we're going to be a nice surprise when we land at that party tomorrow.
Well, have fun, passionate.
And thank you both so much.
I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Thank you both so much for coming on, and thanks for sharing. It was a great conversation. Look forward to the next one. All right.
Great. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Guys.
Night.
Bye-bye. Bye.